Premier Higgs, good to see you. Thank you so much for making the time.
You're very welcome, Vassy.
Premier, you wrote directly to the chair of the committee. Have you received a response to the effect of what the federal Tories are saying, that they will not allow you and your counterparts to testify?
No, I haven't seen a response to that, but I do have confirmation that I am going to participate on the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. So, and that's tomorrow at 6.
Okay, so that's the other committee, the one that the Conservatives chair. Why did you
Correct.
want to testify before a federal committee on Parliament Hill? What do you believe, in your view, it will accomplish outside of the opposition you have already voiced to the federal government?
Well, I think that this is clear. I have been steadfast, I guess, in my opposition to the carbon tax, but I think it's ramping up here now across the nation. We're seeing other parties get involved. We're seeing, certainly premiers from this on the opposite side of the House that are saying, we don't want to impose this on citizens now, and so we've seen it here with our opposition leaders here in New Brunswick. So New Brunswick's a rural province. People have to drive. We don't have buses. We don't have subways, and it's becoming a real burden. So we can keep pretending that it's not impacting affordability in our country, but it certainly is. And it's having a bigger impact in rural provinces. So it's important that we continue to voice our concerns. And yes, ultimately, I'd like to see the carbon tax gone, because I don't think it's the answer to us improving our overall emissions and reducing them.
So let me unpack, Premier, two aspects of that answer. First, on the degree to which it's impacting affordability. There was a letter out today from a number of economists who said, from across the country, who said that by their calculations, it's responsible, they alluded to the Bank of Canada's calculations, it's responsible for about 1/20th of inflation. Is it fair or accurate for you and your counterparts to characterize this as the main culprit in the affordability struggles Canadians are facing, and New Brunswickers, more specifically?
Well, every time you fill up a vehicle and you're paying another 17 cents in April, and it's headed for double that. In fact, our whole costs on either carbon tax on the fuel or carbon tax on on the industries would be quadrupled on the life of the plan that's put in place by the federal government. So to say that currently another 20 cents a liter or $10 to fill up on a 50-liter tank, and then you put that into transportation with trucks they're fueling a lot more, 4 times that, and that doesn't have an impact on groceries. That doesn't have an impact on the commodities, everything we buy at no matter what store. I think we've recognized something very recently too, that this isn't the big issue. The big issue would be industry. And then the other big issue, Vassy, is we can have an impact worldwide. And yet we're working in this little bubble in Canada thinking that we're going to save the world on emissions, when we actually could be making a huge impact if we just open up our bubble and look at what we can do abroad.
I'm going to ask you about that in a second, especially as it pertains to LNG. But I just, again, want to unpack the comments you're making, because in referencing the degree to which you believe the carbon tax affects affordability, you did not reference the rebate that is in place. It's worth $190 for a family of 4 times a year in New Brunswick. Plus, add to that they've now doubled the rural part of the rebate. And I do take your point about people who live in rural parts of your province and the lack of readily available alternatives, the fact that they do have to drive a lot more. But does that doubling of the rebate not acknowledge that and in essence aim to make them whole?
What it doesn't acknowledge is you don't see a rebate on groceries or a rebate on a retail store or clothing or any other commodity that people are buying at higher prices because of the transportation it took to get them there. So just saying that you get a rebate on what you spend on fuel only covers a very small portion of what the total expense would be on other commodities that you purchase every day. So, and we know that that's not the full picture in terms of the rebate. But I think more importantly is that we can have a bigger impact. And I think you say you want to go and talk about that a bit, because I think that's the opportunity we have in Canada. Let's think bigger. Let's think about what we can do with our energy here in Canada to not only make life affordable for Canadians, but have a greater impact worldwide.
But I think can you not do both things at once? Can you think about how to basically help other countries who contribute more to global emissions displace their more resource heavy emitter resource reliance, and at the same time reduce your own emissions so that you have credibility when asking others to do the same. And to that point, I mean, the Canadian Climate Institute just analyzed last week that the consumer carbon tax is worth about 8 to 9% of the projected reduction in emissions by 2030. So I know that you and your colleagues say that it's not doing anything, it's not doing what the feds say it will do, but this institute said it will by 2030.
But Vassy, I think the point is 8 to 9% on 1.5% of world emissions. So it's such a small component for such a large pain that it's causing across our country. That's the point. When we have the affordability here in Canada to have energy supplies that not only can finance greater emission reductions through technology and advancements, and also replacing coal in other countries, we have the ability here in Canada to do a whole lot more. And I would use the money we have in resources to not only, as I said, shut down coal plants, but also to spend on technology development. So it makes it more affordable for people to use energy efficient vehicles or reduce emissions in other ways. So that's my point, is that we are impacting people individually. They're not doing that in the US. They're not doing that in other countries. We're probably, as I understand, the only country that's not using its natural resources to the fullness, especially in this time of transition.
I know your time is limited, Premier, so I do just really quickly want to ask you about LNG, because I interviewed the Prime Minister of Greece over the weekend, who made it quite clear if he could get Canadian LNG at a quote-unquote competitive price to displace any leftover reliance on Russian gas, he would absolutely, I believe was the word he used, take it. There's a lot of conversation about what if something were built in New Brunswick in order to be able to export that LNG. Are you involved in any of those active conversations at the moment? And what do you say in response to proponents of those projects who have withdrawn because they say the economic case is no longer there?
Actually, the reason the economics did not work was because the pipeline cost of transportation to bring gas from out west or from the U.S. The fact is we have 77 trillion standard cubic feet of gas right here in New Brunswick. We have the gas supply to feed a plant that's already here in New Brunswick that could be converted to LNG export. So we have the opportunity in New Brunswick to be a major player in worldwide emission reductions. And so the only economics that didn't work were the facts that the supply needs to be closer. It is closer. And we need the support here from First Nations, from developers, to look at our resource, and for the people of the province to realize this brings billions in economic value, not only to the First Nations community, to all New Brunswickers, to a point where affordability no longer is an issue. So we're sitting on a resource here needed desperately around the world, and we can be a huge solution.
Why do you think, Premier, you haven't been able to convince New Brunswickers that's the case?
Well, I think the challenge here becomes one of an issue of not understanding what's going on out west, what First Nations deals are being made with companies in order to develop LNG exports, and they're seeing the value to their communities. I mean, we can help every First Nations community in this province to lift them out of poverty or any situation economically, because the dollars, even on the most modest estimate, in a very small portion of what's available, we're looking at 800 million to 1.6 billion to the First Nations communities alone on a project that's only a fraction of what's available to us. So I think we just need to understand how big an opportunity it is and give it a real assessment of what it can mean. And to date, that's been very difficult.
Okay, I have to leave it on that note. Like I said, I know your time's limited. You have an event to get to. Premier, I appreciate you making the time this evening. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.